In the spring of 1200 BC, a 9-year-old girl named Nefertari stood trembling in the courtyard of the Temple of Amun at Karnak. Around her, priests moved with deliberate slowness, their bronze razors glinting in the Egyptian sun. Within moments, every strand of her long black hair would be gone, shaved clean from her scalp. Her father, a minor official drowning in temple debt, had brought her here 3 days earlier with promises she didn't understand. He told her this was a great honor, that she would serve the gods, that she should feel blessed. But as the cold metal scraped across her skin, erasing the braids her mother once wove with loving hands, Nefertari began to cry. The blow came swiftly. An older priestess struck her hard across the face, and the words that followed would echo through the rest of her life. Servants of the god, do not cry. You have no tears left, no name left. You belong to Amun now. That single moment marked the death of her childhood and the beginning of 43 years of systematic control, confinement, and exploitation hidden behind temple walls painted with scenes of divine perfection. Here's what most people never realize when they picture ancient Egypt's temples. Nefertari wasn't alone. She was one of thousands of girls and women who lived and died inside these sacred complexes, bearing titles that sounded holy: wives of the god, servants of the divine, hands of the goddess, the pure ones. But behind those beautiful names existed a system designed to destroy lives, to strip away identity, autonomy, and hope. This isn't mythology or speculation. This is documented in papyri, temple archives, and administrative records that survived 3,000 years. It's a truth the hieroglyphs carved on those magnificent walls will never tell you, because the men who commissioned those carvings were the same ones who maintained this hidden machinery of suffering. What you're about to hear goes far beyond what is taught in history classes or shown in documentaries about pharaohs and pyramids. These weren't honored priestesses performing elegant rituals in flowing white linen. They were captives. When we hear the term temple virgin today, we imagine something spiritual and voluntary, women who chose sacred service. But that image is completely false, manufactured by ancient propaganda and our own romantic assumptions. The Egyptian word most commonly used was hemet, meaning servant of the god or wife of the god. Other terms included shemayet for singers and musicians, and kanarat for general temple attendants. Every designation shared one fundamental truth: these women were bound to temple service through systems that stripped them of autonomy and identity. The word virgin didn't mean sexual innocence the way we understand it now. In temple terminology, purity meant ritual purity, a state defined entirely by priests. It referred to being untouched by the profane world, kept separate, kept controlled. This purity was imposed through absolute surveillance over women's bodies, movements, and relationships. They were kept pure for the gods, which in practical terms meant they were kept accessible to the priests who claimed to represent those gods. And here's the crucial reality that changes everything. Most of these women never chose this existence. Many were given to temples as children, years before they could comprehend what it meant. Families dedicated daughters as religious offerings, sometimes seeking divine favor, other times simply needing fewer mouths to feed. What was presented as an act of piety was actually a permanent surrender. The girl was handed over and never came back. Others, like Nefertari, were given as payment for debt. Egyptian temples weren't just religious centers. They were economic empires, owning vast agricultural lands, lending grain and silver, collecting taxes. When families couldn't repay what they owed, they settled accounts with their daughters. It was state-sanctioned human trafficking wrapped in the language of religious devotion. Then there were the girls who had no families to offer them, the ones taken as tribute from conquered peoples. Egyptian military campaigns routinely captured populations from Nubia, Libya, and the Levant. Among the spoils of war were young girls and women, delivered to temples and absorbed into a system from which escape was impossible. The ages of these initiates were horrifyingly young. Temple records mention girls entering service at 8 or 9 years old, many before they reached puberty. They were children, incapable of consent, incapable of understanding what was being done to them. If you want to uncover the darkest truths that history tried to bury, then stay with this channel. Hit that subscribe button because what follows goes deeper into the machinery of control and the women who suffered within it, and their stories deserve to be heard. Let me tell you about one of them, a girl named Mutmoya. She was 8 years old in 1192 BC when Egyptian soldiers arrived at her Nubian village to collect tribute, gold, grain, ivory, and children. Mutmoya was chosen along with 12 others, tied together with rope, and forced to march north for weeks across hundreds of kilometers. She didn't speak Egyptian and had no idea where she was being taken. She cried constantly until a guard struck her across the face and told her crying was forbidden. From that moment she learned to cry silently, tears streaming down her face without sound. When she finally arrived in Thebes, she was assigned to the Temple of Mut, goddess of motherhood. The cruel irony would only become clear over time. She was now serving a deity who symbolized mothers while being permanently denied the right to ever become one herself. The process that transformed children like Nefertari and Mutmoya into temple property was deliberately designed to break them psychologically and emotionally. Once a girl was accepted into service, she underwent rituals meant to erase her past identity and reshape her into an obedient servant. and washed repeatedly with water mixed with natron, a natural salt compound used in religious ceremonies. But what was presented as spiritual cleansing was deeply invasive. These purification baths were ritualized examinations disguised as holy acts. Priests inspected every part of the girl's body under the claim of ensuring she was pure. They insisted the ritual was sacred and necessary, that any resistance would anger the gods. When Nefertari was brought to the stone pool, 3 priests and 2 older women waited. She hesitated to remove her clothes, but one woman grabbed her and tore them away. The water was freezing. One priest stepped into the pool beside her and ordered her to stand still. Then slowly, methodically, he began to touch her in ways that made her tremble with confusion and discomfort. When she recoiled, he seized her arm and said coldly, "The gods are watching. They are testing your obedience." Nefertari froze in terror and endured in silence. That moment, disguised as sacred duty, was her first violation, and it set the pattern for everything that would follow. After purification came the shaving ritual. Every strand of hair was removed from her head. Officially, this preserved ritual purity, but in truth it served to shatter the girl's sense of identity. Hair represented beauty, individuality, personal pride. Removing it erased who she had been. When Nefertari looked at her reflection in a polished bronze mirror afterward, she couldn't recognize the face staring back. That person wasn't Nefertari anymore. It was what the temple had created. Next came renaming. Her birth name, the one her mother gave her, was taken away forever. The priests assigned her a new identity, Nefert Nebet, meaning beautiful as the lady. She was ordered never to speak her true name again. The name that connected her to her family was declared dead. This renaming marked a symbolic death of the child's former self. She was no longer her father's daughter. She was now a creation of the temple, a living offering belonging entirely to the gods. But the most disturbing ritual was still to come, the divine marriage ceremony. Each girl was symbolically married to the deity she would serve. The temple presented this as the highest honor. The child was dressed in fine white linen, her shaved head covered with an ornate wig, her small body adorned with golden jewelry. She was brought before the statue of the god where she would swear vows of eternal service. Priests recited ritual words, claiming the god himself was speaking through them, accepting the girl as his bride. When Mutmuja underwent this ceremony at age 10, dressed in brilliant white linen with golden ornaments gleaming against her dark skin, she was led into the inner sanctuary, a dimly lit chamber dominated by the towering figure of the goddess Mut. The high priest began chanting in the ancient sacred language, insisting it was the voice of Mut herself. He proclaimed that Mut Moya was chosen, pure and blessed to become the goddess's bride. Then he ordered her to repeat the words, "I take these vows. I give myself to Mut. My body is her temple. My life is her property. I will serve in purity and obedience forever." She repeated each phrase without hesitation, without understanding what they truly meant. That moment bound her to the temple for the rest of her life. The priests recorded it as a holy union, but in reality it was a legal contract of ownership. A girl married to a god could never marry a man. That possibility was permanently eliminated. She could never have children recognized as legitimate. She was bound to that institution until death. And there was something darker about this divine marriage, something in how the priests viewed themselves as living representatives of the gods. What that meant for women like Nefertari and Mutmoya would become horrifyingly clear as the years passed. When they were summoned to participate in ceremonies called sacred unions, rituals that claimed to reenact divine myths but concealed violations that would haunt them forever. And in the silence of those temple walls, surrounded by others yet utterly alone, these women learned that the greatest cruelty wasn't what was done to their bodies, but that it was done in the name of the divine, making resistance feel like blasphemy and survival feel like complicity.